Welcome back to Monster Tamer, a 2D Pokemon-like RPG created Phase 3. Previously, we worked on updating our tile level data to have a new NPC that's going to be used for healing our player. And it's also going to act as a respawn point for when our player gets knocked out during our game. If you missed the previous videos, there'll be links to video descriptions to the source code up to this point, as well as complete source code for this video. There'll also be a link to the previous videos I'd like to catch up, so let's get started. Alright, so now that we've updated our NPC JSON file to have some new event types, what we need to do is we actually need to go ahead and update our world scene to handle these. And so the first thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and add in our types for our object definitions for each of our event types. So let's jump over to our type definition. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to copy our code here for our NPC event message. I'm going to paste it twice. And so first, let's go ahead and add our scene, fade in and fade out object type. And so we're just going to call this NPC event scene fade in and out. So for our type on this one, this is going to be our scene fade in, fade out. So I'm just going to copy this. We'll have our object of data. And then what we're going to have is we'll have our three properties here. So I'm just going to copy these and bring them over here. So first we'll have our fade in duration. This is going to be a number. And we'll copy this. We'll paste it twice. And we'll have our fade out duration and then our wait duration. I'm going to clean that up. And then we're going to have our heal object. And so we're just going to do NPC event heal, and this will just be an object. Our type is going to be heal, and for data we'll just have an object, but we won't have any properties on it for the time being, and so we'll just do object. So then what we can do is for NPC event, this can be one of our three new types. So we're going to have our NPC event message, our NPC event scene in fade out, and our NPC event heal. So with our new objects defined, let's jump over to our world scene, and then what we need to do is come down to the bottom of our class. And now we can see that our exhaustive guard is showing that we're not covering all our use cases. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this here and paste it twice. And so first we will have our heal, and then we'll have our scene fade in and out. All right, so let's go ahead and update our code. So we'll start with our heal event type first. So we can go ahead and get rid of this here, and let's go ahead and clean that up for our scene fade in and fade out. And so what we want to do is when we want to heal, when we have this interaction type, the first thing we want to do is we want to set is processing NPC event. We're going to set equal to true. And then so what we'd want to do is we want to go ahead and run whatever logic we need to do. And then when we're done with it, we want to go ahead and set this equal to false. And so all we want to do when we want to heal is we can use our built-in heal player party method. And so we'll just go ahead and call that. And so the last thing we want to do after we heal is we want to go ahead and automatically start our next event. So currently, based on our message structure, what happens is when we have a message event type, we want to display it to the player, but then not do anything until our player interacts. And so when our player interacts, that results in us calling our handle NPC interaction method again. And instead, we want to go ahead and automate that. So then that way, after we heal our party, we would go ahead and just start processing our next interaction. And so in order to do that without having the player have to interact with the NPC, we're just going to go ahead and call this method again recursively. And then that way we'll go ahead and jump right to our next event that we need to process. All right, so then for our scene fade in and out event, what we want to go ahead and do is we're going to do similar logic. So let's just copy these 3 lines of code here. We're going to go ahead and paste it. And so what we want to do is we want to go ahead and say, hey, we're going to start processing an event. All right, so for our scene fade in, fade out effect, this one's going to be a little bit more asynchronous where we want our 2 effects to finish completely before we say we're done processing our event. And so with this, we want our fade out effect to go ahead and finish. When that finishes, we want to go ahead and do our fade in effect. And only when that one is done, we want to say, hey, we're done with this event. And so to go ahead and do this, the first thing we need to do is actually have our camera fade out. So what we can do is we can reference our cameras on our scene. Go ahead and grab our main camera, and then we're going to use our built-in fade out effect. And so with this effect, we can go ahead and specify a duration. And so this is where we're going to use our event data. So we're going to do our event data, and then we're going to grab our fade out duration. And so now we can go ahead and dynamically control this from our data. And so for the time being, we're just going to do the color black. So we'll fade out to black. And then what we want to do is we need to provide our callback. And so then that way we know when we're done with this event. So in our callback, we're going to reference to our camera. And so I'm just going to call this fade out camera. And then we're going to get our fade out progress. So then what we can do is we can check our progress. It's going to be between 0 and 1. If it's not 1, we don't want to do anything. So what we can do is we can just return early. So if our fade out progress does not equal 1, we're just going to go ahead and return. If it does equal 1, now we want to go ahead and start our wait. So if you remember in our data, we define 3 durations. So 1 is for our fade out. Then we want to wait a small period of time before we start a fade in duration. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we'll use our delayed call to go ahead and wait before we do our next interaction. And so we'll do this, we'll do our time, we'll do delayed call, and now we can reference our data, and we'll do our wait duration. And now in this callback, this is where we'll want to go ahead and do our fade in effect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this line of code here, we're going to go ahead and paste it, and close our callback. And so what we want to do is we actually want to do a fade in effect. And then we want to reference our fade in duration. And it's just so these are different, I'm going to go ahead and do fade in camera, and I'm going to do fade in progress. So then what we want to do is similarly, if it does not equal 1, we're going to go ahead and return early. And so we'll just do fade in progress. And if it does equal 1, so we're done fading in, now we want to go ahead and say, hey, we're actually done with our event. We've finished up everything we want to do. And similarly to what we did for our heal, is we want to go ahead and trigger our next event automatically, because after we fade in, we don't want the player to actually have to interact with the scene. We just want to go ahead and start doing the next event. So we're just going to go ahead and call our method again recursively, so we do our next event. All right, so with our new logic in place, we should be able to go ahead and test our NPC healing us. So let's go ahead and come over to our game. Let's do a new game. Let's go into our house and let's go talk to our NPC. So now what should happen is we should see our dialog message, and I'm going to go ahead and pull up our data. So after our first message, we hit space. Oh, all right, we get our fade out and fade in effect. Perfect. And then when it completes, we automatically transition to our next event. And so we get our message, oh good, your monsters are looking great. So what we just validated is when we talk to our NPC, we process our first event and we wait. We wait until our player interacts with our dialogue, and once we do, we automatically trigger our next event. And that one automatically triggers our next one. And when that's done, it finally triggers our last one. And so that's exactly what we're looking for. And so just to make sure our data is actually working, what we're going to go ahead and do is let's jump over to our monsters JSON file. And for our first monster, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to set our current HP to be 10 when our scene starts. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to do a new game. If we go into our monsters, okay, perfect. So our monster has 10 HP. They're not fully healed. And now we're just going to make sure our logic's working. So let's go into our house. We'll go ahead and talk to the NPC again. We'll trigger our various events. All right, team's healed. And now if we go into our data, let's go into our party. We can see our monster is now fully healed. All right, so now that we've validated that all of our new data types are working properly for our events, the last thing we need to go ahead and do is we need to go ahead and update our logic for our respawn point. So previously we updated our data in tiled to go ahead and have this new area metadata field on our tiled level data. And based on that, it's going to help us find our spawn location in our game depending on the area we're in. And so to go ahead and make these changes, what I'm going to go ahead and do is let's jump over to our world scene and let's come to the top of our class. The first thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and add in our types for our new object properties. So I'm just going to copy this here. And we're going to change this to tiled. And we'll do area metadata property. And so for our fields, we're going to have faint location. And we're going to have our ID. So then I'm just going to change this to faint underscore location. And now what we want to do is when we initialize our scene, we had some logic for when our player is knocked out. And we had it to do so then that way we can actually change our respawn location based on our map data. And so now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to replace our logic here where we have our hard-coded value for where we set our location. We're going to go ahead and grab this and then parse it from our JSON, from our tiled data. And so to go ahead and do this, we need to grab our map data from tiled. And so what I'm going to do is we'll make a new variable, we'll do let, we'll do map, and we'll do equal to this, make tile map. And so for our key, we'll want to go ahead and grab it from our scene data, and we want to grab our area. And then we want to go ahead and call the toUpperCase method on it. And then we need to go ahead and add our suffix for level, and now we'll have our tile data. So now we need to go ahead and grab our object layer that has our area metadata. And so make a new variable, do const metadata properties. It's going to be equal to map. We want to get our object layer. And we are looking for area metadata. And then we want to go ahead and grab our objects. And we want to grab our first object since it'll only be one. And we want to grab our properties from it. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do a console log. And we're just going to console log our area metadata properties when our scene starts. And so we want to go ahead and test. We need to go ahead and set our is player knocked out. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to go ahead and set this to be true automatically when our scene starts. So now if we come over to our game, we should be able to test. Let's do new game. And we'll see right away when our scene starts. Now we have our properties. And so we can see our faint location is our string. We see building 1. And then we have our ID and we're in area 0. All right, so now that we have our properties, what we need to do now is based on our faint location, that's going to point to which JSON file we need to load. And so what's telling us is we need to go ahead and grab our building 1 file. So then that way we can find our faint location to get our X and Y values we need here when we set our player's position. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to get rid of our console log. And I'm going to go ahead and do const. We'll do knockout spawn location. And I'm going to set that equal to our area metadata properties. And we're going to use our find method. And then what we want to find is we need to find our property where our property name is equal to our tiled area metadata property, and we want our faint location. And so we want to go ahead and grab that value. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to do console.log, and we'll do knocked out spawn location. So we'll go ahead and save, we'll come back and we do new game. We'll see we grabbed our building 1 property, perfect. All right, so now that we have our knockout spawn location, which points to which JSON file we need to grab our spawn location from, what we need to do now is we need to know if we're currently in that area. If not, we need to load that JSON file from tiled. If we are, then we already have the data we need to go ahead and find our spawn location. And so the reason we need to do that is depending on how our game is structured, there's a possibility we could get knocked out in areas where there is a spawn location, and we could get knocked out in areas where there's not a spawn location. And so we'll need to make sure this is dynamic so we can handle both cases. And so what we're going to go ahead and do, we're just going to add an if statement. We'll say if our knocked out spawn location does not equal our scene data area, then we know we need to go ahead and grab some new data from tiled. And so what we need to do is we need to go ahead and get a new tile map based on this knocked out spawn locations data. And so what we can do is let's go ahead and update our map values. We're just going to copy this here. We're going to go ahead and paste it. And what we want to go ahead and do is we also want to update our scene data so that when we spawn in the right area. So we'll do our scene data, we'll do our area is going to be equal to our knockout spawn location. All right, so after we do that, now we need to go ahead and find our object layer that has our revive location. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to copy this here. I'm going to go ahead and paste that down here. And we're going to change this to be our revive location. We're going to create our object layer. And so we don't want area metadata. We want revive location. And we want to go ahead and just grab our object, but we don't want the properties from it. So then what we should be able to do is I'm going to do a console log, and I'm going to do revive location, and we should be able to go ahead and test our change. All right, so if we go ahead and save, let's go ahead and test. Let's go into new game. All right, we'll see right away something is different. So we can see our object from our revive location is being logged, perfect. And we're in a black area. So what's happening is we found our correct area. So we found our building 1, and so now we're loading that into our data for our world scene. However, for our player's location, we are way down below our building. And so then that's why we can't see it. So now what we just need to do is based on this revive location, we need to go ahead and update our X and Y values to use this. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is we'll change our X location to revive location.x. We're going to do the same thing for our Y value. And we'll go ahead and subtract our tile size. And then what we'll do is we're going to change this to go ahead and point up. And the reason for that is so then that way we'll be facing our NPC that's going to heal us. So let's go ahead and get rid of this council log. All right, so go ahead and save. We should be able to test our changes. So let's go ahead and do new game. And because we've left our property for is knocked out set to true, what's happening is when we start a new game, we go to our first area. Because we're knocked out, we now load our building level data and we set that for the area a player is currently in. And then based on our revive location, we're now updating our player's location to be in front of our NPC like we want. And we go ahead and have our player face the NPC so it looks like the NPC is actually talking to us. So now if we go ahead and go through our dialogue, it just looks like we got knocked out, our team's healed, and now it looks much better than when our NPC was outside of the house, and it looks like our NPC's taking care of us. Alright, so real quick what we'll do is let's go ahead and set our isPlayer knockback out to be our default value, and let's go ahead and clean up our to-do since we added in that logic. Alright, so with our last changes, that actually brings this video to an end. And that actually wraps up our section on our world scene part 3, where we added in a bunch of new enhancements to our game. So as a reminder, there is a link in the description of the video to the clear source code for this video, and as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you did enjoy the video, please consider liking the video and hitting the bell icon to be notified when the next video in the series is released. For more great Phaser 3 content, please see the links on your screen now.